Hey everyone, I just wanted to have a quick chat about The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde, which I read for the first time this past week. Not actually for the first time, I'm pretty sure I read about half of it when I was too young to really get anything out of it because so much of the first half of the book felt very familiar to me, but I'd never read the ending, and so that was very shocking, and I'm going to try not to spoil the ending or too much of the plot in this chat. But yeah, wow. My first impression, I just loved it. I thought it was exquisitely written, that the prose is exquisite. There were so many stunning passages full of lofty sentiments. The characters were super intriguing. Dorian, Basil, Lord Henry. And the book deals with themes that really matter to me personally, such as the value of art, the place of beauty, the nature of morality, the fleetingness of youth. Yeah, I think The Picture of Dorian is definitely one that needs to be reread frequently because it just felt like a simple but complex story with wells of meaning. Like, it just felt like I could have sat and meditated on so many of the passages, and so I'm looking forward to rereading it and seeing what I learn, what I experience, and what I get out of it next time. But before I get into sort of more of an analysis of some things, I just want to read some of my favorite passages from the book, which I wrote down in my commonplace book. This is just to give you a sense of how poetic Wilde's prose is. So he says, in The Picture of Dorian Gray, "There is a fatality about all physical and intellectual distinction, the sort of fatality that seems to dog through history the faltering steps of kings. It is better not to be different from one's fellows. The ugly and the stupid have the best of it in this world. They can sit at their ease and gape at their play. If they know nothing of victory, they are at least spared the knowledge of defeat." What? Here's another one. "Every portrait that is painted with feeling is a portrait of the artist, not of the sitter. Genius lasts longer than beauty. Those who are faithful only know the trivial side of love. It is the faithless who know love's tragedies. Beauty is a form of genius, is higher indeed than genius, as it needs no explanation. Human life, that appeared to him the one thing worth investigating. Lips that Shakespeare taught to speak have whispered their secret in my ear. The tragedy of old age is not that one is old, but that one is young. A chance tone of color in a room or a morning sky, a particular perfume that you once loved and that brings subtle memories with it, a line from a forgotten poem that you had once loved, that you had come across again, a cadence from a piece of music that you had ceased to play. I tell you, Dorian, that it is on things like these that our lives depend. It was the living death of his own soul that troubled him." And last quote, "There was a God who called upon men to tell their sins to earth as well as to heaven." These are just a few of many gorgeous phrases, quotes, passages that stood out to me while reading this. It's just, Oscar Wilde was truly someone who knew how to use words beautifully, craft beautiful sentences, that even when the meaning or the message is perhaps questionable, like, I kind of had a sense that much of what he's saying through various characters is just untrue, that there's falsehood beneath the beautiful prose. Not all of it, of course, but a lot of it. And yet it still is artistically beautiful, stylistically beautiful, and as we're going to see in a minute, that's sort of the point. So, to begin, before you read The Picture of Dorian Gray, you need to read the preface, which comes right before it, which is literally just a list of principles or epigrams, mainly about the artist and art and beauty, and you need to read these and approach the story with these in mind. So here we have Oscar's famous maxim that there is no such thing as a moral or an immoral book. Books are well written or badly written, that is all. And then the last maxim is, all art is quite useless. The irony of this, of course, is that The Picture of Dorian Gray is very well written from that stylistic, artistic perspective. It is beautiful, it is stunning, it is great art in that sense, yet it's also a profoundly moral work. I don't see how one can walk away from The Picture of Dorian Gray without taking a moral lesson from the downfall of Dorian Gray, without really thinking about good and evil and the effects that wicked deeds and that sin have on the human soul, on the sinner's soul, and on the lives and souls of those around them. I can't see how this is not a moral work. After all, Dorian Gray's own picture in the story is literally the judge or the arbitrator of the morality of his soul. So, in my opinion, this work is profoundly moral. In response to Oscar's maxim that art is useless, Picture of Dorian Gray is a great work of art, but it is not useless. It profoundly changes the reader and challenges him or her to investigate their own soul. At least that is what it did for me. So what does Oscar mean in these epigrams? Does he actually believe that there's no such thing as a moral or immoral book, or that art is useless? Are these his true beliefs about art and morality, or are his true beliefs actually revealed in the story, not in the epigrams that come before the story? Can we confidently identify what Oscar Wilde actually believes about art and morality? Does it even matter what he believes about art and morality, what he says about it in the epigrams, when the story shows a truth about art and morality? Anyways, the ultimate question that Wilde is exploring in The Picture of Dorian Gray is beauty enough? Is beauty enough? Is beauty the most important thing in life? Or must it be coupled with goodness and truth? Truth, goodness, and beauty. While immoral art may be beautiful from a stylistic or aesthetic standpoint, wouldn't it be more beautiful if it promoted and was infused with goodness and truth, all three together? Is that not more powerful than one of the three on its own? I would argue yes to these last few questions, that the three transcendentals ought to go together, and that their effect when together is superior when they're walking hand in hand, both in life and in art. That's my belief. What does Oscar Wilde believe? That is the real question. And he did say to the Scots Observer, "If a work of art is rich and vital and complete, those who have artistic instincts will see its beauty, and those to whom ethics appeal more strongly will see its moral lesson." I feel like I see both when I'm reading The Picture of Dorian Gray. I see its artistic beauty, but I also see a moral lesson. I see moral truths. I see projected moral falsehoods. I see it all as I'm reading through this. If you've read this book, let me know what you think of that premise. I think knowing a little bit about the life and the worldview as much as we can, and sort of the priorities of Oscar Wilde, the scholar and the artist, helps a lot in making sense of The Picture of Dorian Gray. Oscar Wilde, if you're not familiar with him, he was an Irish writer of the late Victorian period. He was a dandy, known for his flamboyant dress and his biting wit. His life was a work of art. He actually said about himself, I wrote in my commonplace book, he said, "I have put my genius into my life. I have only put my talent into my works." He endeavored to make his life a work of art, just as Dorian Gray does in The Picture of Dorian Gray. And he very much lived against the Victorian norm and sort of called out the hypocrisy of Victorian morals, saying, hey, you guys preach against this, say you don't do this, but you do. And so, yeah, I think he had a complicated view of morality and standards of morality, and I don't know enough about his view on those things to really share too much right now. Something interesting, though, he said in 1894 about The Picture of Dorian Gray, he said, "The Picture of Dorian Gray contains much of me in it. Basil Hallward is what I think I am. Lord Henry, what the world thinks I am. Dorian is what I would like to be in other ages, perhaps." Note that he doesn't say who he is. He says, Basil Hallward, the artist who paints the picture of Dorian Gray, and who is a really moral guy. He has pretty strong moral instincts and really tries to keep Dorian on a good moral path. And so it's interesting that Oscar Wilde sees himself as that character. The artist who's also instinctively concerned with morality. Lord Henry, who the world thinks he is, Lord Henry being this really indulgent, nihilistic, sort of hedonist character. And then Dorian is what he would like to be, Dorian being the beautiful boy whose life is a work of art, who has eternal youth and the world at his fingertips. And yet, who is Oscar Wilde? Out of all these characters, he doesn't admit to being one of them. Perhaps he is all three. I wanted to note a few literary connections. I mean, this book is full of allusions to other works of literature, especially to classic literature and classic mythology, because Oscar Wilde studied classics at Oxford back in the day. Right away, the story reminded me of the myth of Narcissus. Like Narcissus, when Dorian finally looks into the pool and comprehends his sort of unearthly beauty, he falls in love with his own aesthetic perfection, but this proves to be his downfall. I'll say no more on that. It also reminded me of Faust. There are different renditions of the story of Faust in literature. The one that I'm most familiar with is von Goethe's Faust. I love von Goethe's Faust. Anyways, Faust is this academic character who compiles and consumes the knowledge of the world, and he ends up making a deal with the devil, what we call a Faustian bargain. His deal is basically he sells his soul for worldly power and knowledge. Dorian Gray sells his soul, although accidentally, not even realizing that he's really making this deal with the devil or the universe. He sells his for eternal youth. So his portrait will bear the scars of age and sin, his inner soul sickness, while he himself will remain youthful and beautiful in the flower of his youth and beauty forever, which of course is an illusion, is not reflecting what's really inside him. And so even though he can walk around and pretend that he's still this beautiful, innocent youth, his true nature will always be on exhibition in his painting, which he keeps hidden until the very end, because of course he doesn't want people to see that. Oscar Wilde described A Picture of Dorian Gray as a tale old in the history of literature, and it very much is so, and yet he renders it in such a beautifully original way. This is truly a story that I can't see how anyone can read it and not feel profoundly moved, whatever that looks like for the reader. Anyways, a few final thoughts on this. I really don't want to spoil much about the plot. I want you to go and read this work and explore it for yourself. But I can't help but sort of pity Dorian, because in the beginning, he truly is this pure and good and innocent young man who happens to be very physically beautiful, very attractive at the same time. It's really the influence of his friend, the hedonistic friend, Lord Henry, that corrupts him. Lord Henry encourages Dorian to make the most of his youth by indulging in every available pleasure and living this sort of artistic and aesthetic but amoral, or I would argue immoral, life. And he gives him a book that corrupts him. He's just a bad guy and a terrible influence on Dorian. Of course, the seeds of evil were already in Dorian's heart, like they are in all of our hearts. But it's Lord Henry who really waters, prunes, and nourishes them. And ultimately, Lord Henry's philosophy and way of living gets them nowhere but a place of loneliness, corruption, agedness, despair, and death. And so ultimately, even though Lord Henry promotes this idea that beauty and sensual fulfillment are all that are worth pursuing in life, that is proven not true, because Dorian pursues them at Lord Henry's encouragement. Dorian takes that idea and runs, and ends up in a place that I don't think any of us would wish to end up in. And there's his portrait, a hideously ugly, disgusting, vile, withered old man, who he really is on the inside after living for himself all those years. And so that's all I want to say about The Picture of Dorian Gray today. I think this is a favorite classic with many, so I hope that a lot of you have thoughts that you're willing to share here on my channel. Comment down below what you think of my sort of analysis and my thoughts here. Let me know if you have any other insights or things that I missed. And let's just have a discussion about this fantastic book and about art and morality and beauty and all these things that are so, so important. Thanks so much for being here and for watching this video. Please give it a like and subscribe to my channel, and I will see you again very soon.